Welcome to another deep dive.
Ooh.
We got a request to break down music notation and terminology 101.
Yeah.
Someone out there wants to get a handle on sheet music, huh?
Sounds like it.
Well, consider us their guides for this deep dive. We're
Absolutely.
going to unlock the language of music together. No prior experience needed, right?
None whatsoever.
So we'll cover some really cool stuff.
Okay.
Like how a note's position on those lines, the staff, determines the pitch.
Right.
And we'll learn about rests, the power of silence in music.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, why those Italian words tell us how loud or soft to play.
Yeah, that's always interesting.
I have to admit, whenever I look at sheet music, it's like staring at a secret code. I don't even know where to start.
It can be pretty intimidating,
Hmm.
but it's basically just a way to see sound. Music notation, I mean.
Okay.
It captures the rhythm, the melody, and the harmony all in one place with symbols and stuff.
So that makes sense. But where do we begin with those symbols? The presentation mentions the staff.
Yeah.
What's that exactly?
The staff, you can think of it as like the foundation of our music.
Yeah.
It's those 5 lines and the 4 spaces.
Oh, yeah?
Each line, and each space represents a different pitch. So the higher you go on the staff, the higher the pitch.
So like a ladder for notes.
Yeah.
The higher you climb, the higher the note.
Exactly. And then to tell us which note goes with which pitch, that's where clefs come in. Those symbols at the very beginning of the staff, they're kind of like signposts,
I see.
telling us where we are on this ladder.
Why so many different clefs? Why not just one for every instrument and singer?
That's a great question. Well, instruments and voices, they all have different ranges.
Mhm.
Some are very high, sopranos.
Right.
Others, like a bass, super low.
Hmm.
And same thing for instruments.
Right.
So if we were to write everything on one clef, we'd have tons of extra lines
Yeah,
above and below the staff.
that would be a mess.
It would. So using different clefs, we can shift the focus to where it's needed most.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And I see the presentation really focuses on the treble clef and bass clef. Are those the most common?
Absolutely. Yeah, you'll see those two way more than any other.
Okay.
Treble clef, as you might guess, that's for higher instruments and voices.
Okay.
And then bass clef is for the lower ranges.
Got it. So if I'm trying to read sheet music for, say, a piano piece, I'd need to know both, right?
Precisely. Since pianos play high and low,
Makes sense.
you'll often see something called a grand staff, which combines both
Okay.
treble clef and bass clef to cover the full range of the instrument.
So staff and clefs, check. Now, how do we actually show those sounds? I'm guessing this is where notes come in.
You got it.
Okay.
Notes tell us the pitch to play and how long to hold it, like, words in a musical sentence.
And they're just named after the first 7 letters of the alphabet?
They are?
That's pretty easy.
It is.
A, B, C, D, E, F, G.
Exactly.
And their position on the staff, guided by the clef, that tells us what pitch to play. But wait, what about the different shapes?
Good point.
Some are filled in, some are open, and some even have stems and flags.
You're talking about note values.
Okay.
So those shapes, that's all about how long we hold the note. That's what creates rhythm, right?
Right.
The presentation mentions whole notes, half notes, quarter notes, all those. It refers to how long the sound lasts compared to a beat.
So if a quarter note is 1 beat, a half note would be 2.
Yes.
And a whole note would be 4.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense.
It's how we precisely time the music. And of course, we can't forget silence in music.
Yeah, there has to be some quiet moments too.
That's represented by rests.
Rests. So there are symbols that tell us not to play.
Exactly.
Play.
Just like notes, rests have different shapes for their duration. So a quarter rest would be 1 beat of silence.
Right.
Like a quarter note would be 1 beat of sound.
Okay, so now we can read individual notes, rests, the whole deal.
Right.
But what about like the overall rhythm of a whole piece?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not just random, right?
Of course not. That's where time signatures come in.
Time signatures.
They tell us how those beats are organized within measures, so it gives us a framework for the rhythm.
The presentation says the top number that tells us the beats per measure and the bottom number that tells us what type of note gets a beat. But what does that actually mean?
Let's use a common time signature as an example. 44, you've probably seen that, also called common time.
Okay.
So that top 4, that means 4 beats per measure. And the bottom 4, that means a quarter note gets 1 beat.
So in 44 time, we'd count 1, 2, 3, 4 for each measure,
Precisely.
with each count being a quarter note.
Exactly. That's why 44 is so common.
It feels pretty natural, yeah.
It does. And, it's steady.
Yeah.
Like a heartbeat.
Yeah, yeah, okay. So if we wanted a different feel, like a waltz, we'd change the time signatures. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
Waltzes usually use 34 time, 3 beats per measure. Quarter note still gets the beat, creates that, that 1 2 3 1 2 3 waltz feel.
I get it. Wow, it's so interesting. It's like time signatures are about more than just keeping time.
Yeah,
They shape the whole feel of the music.
absolutely. They create different rhythmic effects and moods.
Uh,
Adds a lot of complexity to the music.
I'm loving this. Okay, so we covered the staff, clefs, notes, rests, now time signatures. It feels like we're getting somewhere.
We're really starting to crack this code.
Yeah, yeah.
And, just like with spoken language, it takes a little time to really get fluent, but stick with us.
Hmm,
You'll be deciphering sheet music in no time. You ready to keep going?
I am. But maybe we should take a short break first.
Yeah, good idea.
Catch our breath before we tackle the next piece of this musical puzzle.
All right.
All right, back to our musical deep dive. We've talked about the basics of rhythm, but the presentation also gets into scales and key signatures.
Right.
Those always seemed a bit mysterious to me.
I can see why. They can be kind of complex, but they're really just systems for organizing the pitches and giving melodies a framework.
Okay, so if notes are like the letters of our musical alphabet, are scales like forming words?
Yeah, I like that. Think of a scale as a specific sequence of notes, like a musical recipe.
Okay.
For example, the C major scale, it uses all the white keys on the piano.
Mm-hmm.
Starting on C, going up to the next C, it's got a pretty bright and happy sound.
Wait, so different scales can create different moods?
Absolutely. Like if you play a minor scale, A minor, let's say, uses a different combo of white and black keys, you get a more like somber or melancholic sound.
Wow, I never realized scales were so important for the emotional tone.
Yeah.
So how do key signatures fit in?
Key signatures tell us which notes will be sharp or flat, within a specific scale.
Okay.
Remember how each line and space on the staff is a certain pitch?
Yeah.
Well, key signatures use sharps or flats to adjust those pitches based on the scale.
So instead of putting a sharp next to every single note that needs to be raised a half step, the key signature just does it all at once at the beginning.
Exactly. It's a shortcut. Keeps the sheet music from being cluttered with, all those accidentals.
Makes sense.
Lets us focus on the melody and rhythm without having to adjust every note.
It's starting to click.
Yeah.
Scales give us the melody, and key signatures tell us what to adjust. It's like the blueprint for the music.
You got it. And these elements, with the rhythm stuff we talked about, form the basis of how we write and understand music.
We briefly touched on dynamics, but I'm curious about how composers show volume.
Yeah.
The presentation talks about using Italian terms for that. Is there a reason?
It's kind of cool, actually. It goes back to the Renaissance.
Hmm.
Italy was like the center of music then, and it's stuck. Adds a little history to our modern music language.
So instead of writing, play this quietly or play this loudly, they use Italian words like piano or forte.
Exactly. And the specific terms, they often paint a really vivid picture. Pianissimo, that means super soft, delicate, tender.
Right.
Then there's fortissimo, very loud, power and intensity.
I see. It's like the composers adding their own emotional notes right there on the page.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
But wouldn't it be easier to just use symbols or abbreviations than learning all these Italian words?
Well, sometimes they do use symbols, but those Italian terms, they have this elegance to them.
Yeah.
Imagine seeing like beep beep on the score versus pianissimo. The Italian just gives a better sense of how soft it should be.
Makes sense. It's like, whisper versus speak very, very softly.
Exactly. And musicians don't just play the notes, they interpret them. Those dynamic markings guide their performance, help them bring that emotion and artistry.
That's cool. It's like a whole new level of expression.
Mm-hmm.
What about tempo? How do composers show the speed of a piece?
Tempo is super important, and just like with dynamics, Italian is used a lot. You'll see terms like allegro, meaning fast, moderato, moderate, lento for slow. It gives the player a general idea.
So if I see allegro at the beginning of a piece, I know it's going to be lively.
You got it. Okay, cool.
But there's more than those basic ones. Composers might use like andante, meaning at a walking pace, or presto, which means very fast.
Oh, so much detail. This deep dive is making me realize how complex sheet music really is.
It is. Every symbol, term, everything on the score, it's all there for a reason to bring the composer's vision to life.
This is fascinating. But maybe we should pause for a moment. There's still more to explore. We're back. Final part of our music notation journey. I gotta say, learning about scales, key signatures, dynamics, tempo, it really makes you appreciate all those layers in music.
Right. It's incredible how these tiny details create such a huge range of sound and emotion.
The presentation talks about music being this universal language.
Yeah.
But we just spent all this time talking about specific symbols, terms, even Italian. How can something with so many rules and details be universal? That's a really good point. I think it's like this. The notation might change between cultures, across different times.
Right.
But the basic elements of music, like the building blocks, those are found everywhere in every human culture.
I see, yeah.
Think about it. Rhythm, melody, harmony, they go beyond language barriers.
So even if we write it down differently, the way humans experience music, that's universal.
Exactly. Every culture has its own way of expressing music.
Right.
Singing, chanting, drumming, instruments, all those things, it all comes down to those core elements. They just resonate with us on a deep level.
That makes a lot of sense. So learning to read music notation, it's kind of like connecting to a global network, like of human expression,
That's a cool way to think about
a
it.
way to tap into all those traditions
Yeah,
from everywhere and throughout history.
exactly. It's like you're learning this language that opens up this huge world of music.
Wow, this deep dive has really changed how I see sheet music. It's not just like instructions on a page. It's a doorway to all these creative possibilities.
I like that. And you know what the presentation said? With enough practice, anyone can learn to read and write music. It's a skill anyone can develop.
Right.
And it really unlocks a whole new level of understanding and enjoying music.
Yeah. Imagine being able to like hum a tune you make up in your head
Uh-huh.
and then write it down.
And then you can keep it forever.
It's like saving a thought.
Yeah, it's powerful stuff. You're not just listening, you're participating in the creation.
This whole deep dive, so eye-opening. I feel like we just scratched the surface, though.
And that's what's so great about music. There's always more to learn, to discover, to explore. This was just the first step.
Well, I know I'm inspired to keep going. I'm definitely curious to, go beyond just listening, to actually understand how the music I love is made.
That's great to hear. Remember, it's a journey, not a destination. Just enjoy learning and be curious. Who knows what you'll find?
On that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive. But before we go, a little something to think about. If music is this universal language, what stories and emotions can you unlock? By learning to read and write it. Keep listening, keep learning, and keep exploring the world of music.